The most terrifying thing a monster can say to you is not a threat. It is an invitation. Picture a young man arriving after dark at a vast, crumbling castle high in the Carpathian Mountains, where the driver has vanished, the wolves are howling, and the great door stands shut. And then it swings open on its own, and a tall old man steps out of the dark, and instead of seizing him, instead of dragging him inside, he smiles and welcomes him and tells him to come in of his own free will. That is the horror at the heart of this book, and it is a far stranger horror than fangs and blood. The oldest, coldest predator in the world cannot simply take you. By some ancient rule, he has to be let in. You have to open the door yourself. This is the story of what happens when a very modern world, proud of its trains and telegraphs and science, meets something that is patient, ancient, and utterly without conscience, something that has all the time in the world and knows exactly how to make good, reasonable people invite it across their own threshold. Bram Stoker is not really writing about a man with fangs. He is writing about how evil actually gets in, not by breaking down the door, but by being charming enough and us being polite enough that we open it and stand aside. And he is writing about the one thing that can stop it, not a stronger monster, but a handful of ordinary people who refuse to face it alone. The book is Dracula, published in 1897 by Bram Stoker, an Irish theatre manager who spent 7 years quietly assembling folklore, ship's logs, and travel notes into the vampire novel that would define the genre forever. He wrote at the very end of the Victorian age, a moment drunk on its own progress. Steam trains, telegraphs, blood transfusions, shorthand, the typewriter, the phonograph. A civilization convinced it had finally outgrown superstition. And into that confident modern world, Stoker drops something that predates all of it. A creature from a half-forgotten corner of Europe who books passage, quite literally, from a ruined castle straight to the heart of the largest, most modern city on Earth. It begins with a young English solicitor named Jonathan Harker, who travels east to help a mysterious nobleman, Count Dracula, buy property in London. At the castle door, the Count greets him with words that should have been a warning, and instead sound like courtesy. Stoker writes, "Welcome to my house. Enter freely and of your own will." Harker, being a polite young professional far from home, walks in. Keep that threshold in mind as we go, because it is the key to the whole book. Everything terrible that follows is set in motion not by force, but by consent. By an invitation accepted, a door held open, a reasonable person doing the reasonable, courteous thing. Stoker's monster is powerful, but his real subject is us. How easily the decent and the modern can be talked into welcoming the very thing that will destroy them. Here is the whole novel in one sentence. A cold, ancient predator books passage from his crumbling castle straight into the heart of the modern world, and the only thing that can stop him is a small band of friends who trust each other completely, who pool their letters, their diaries, their telegrams, their knowledge, against an evil that treats time itself as a weapon. That is the shape of it. On one side stands Dracula, alone, patient, centuries old, able to wait out any single human life. On the other stands a group, an English lawyer, a doctor, a professor, an aristocrat, a Texan, and above all, a brilliant young woman named Mina, who have nothing like his power, but who have the one thing he can never have, which is one another. The book is famously told entirely through documents. journal entries, letters, telegrams, newspaper clippings, transcribed phonograph recordings stitched together by the characters themselves. And that form is the argument. This is a horror story about information, about who shares what they know and who faces the dark alone. We will walk it in 5 beats. The guest trap, blood in London, the old science, Mina's mind, and racing the sunset. First, the guest trap. Harker quickly realizes that he is not a guest at Castle Dracula. He is livestock. The doors lock only from the outside. The Count has no reflection in the shaving glass and casts no shadow. He crawls face down over the castle wall like a lizard. There are no servants. The courteous old man makes the beds and lays the table himself, because there is no one else, only him and the 3 pale women who drift out of the moonlight and nearly drain Harker before the Count drives them off, hissing that this one is his. And in one unforgettable night, Harker stands at a window and hears wolves gathering in the dark, and the Count turns to him, eyes shining, and says, "Listen to them, the children of the night. What music they make." It is a line of pure, chilling relish. This is a being who loves the predators of the world and counts himself among them. Notice what makes the trap so modern. Dracula never chases Harker down. He simply lets him walk in, be polite, sign the papers, and slowly discover the walls have closed behind him. The most dangerous monster in this book is not the one who breaks in. It is the one who gets you to volunteer. The one who relies on your good manners, your professionalism, your reluctance to make a scene, to keep you smiling and cooperating right up until it is too late. Every one of us has walked deeper into something we sensed was wrong, because leaving would have been rude or awkward or bad for business. Harker's imprisonment is that instinct taken to its horrifying end. The trap that only works because the victim keeps being reasonable. Second, blood in London. Dracula does not stay in his mountains. He has himself sealed inside great wooden boxes filled with his native Transylvanian earth and shipped by sea to England. And when the ship reaches the coast in a supernatural storm, it runs aground with every sailor dead and the captain lashed to the wheel. And a great dog leaps ashore and vanishes into the night. The predator has arrived, and he brings his own soil with him, because he can only rest in the earth of home. Now the horror moves to drawing rooms and bedrooms. Lucy, a lovely, popular young woman, begins to fade. Pale, listless, sleepwalking, with 2 small marks on her throat that the local doctors cannot explain. They pour transfusion after transfusion into her, modern medicine at its most confident, and still she slips away, because they are treating a disease that their science has no name for. Behind all of it is Dracula's terrible creed, the thing that drives him and that Stoker repeats like a heartbeat through the book. The blood is the life. The blood is the life. Read that beat with modern eyes, and it is unnervingly current. Here is a threat that crosses a border hidden inside ordinary cargo, that spreads invisibly from person to person, that turns the victims themselves into carriers who infect the next. It is an epidemic story, a story about contagion arriving by ship, about experts who cannot see what they cannot name, about a danger that travels faster than the systems built to catch it. In 1897, Stoker gave that anxiety a face and a title. But the fear of the thing that slips across the border and spreads while the authorities argue is as fresh as this morning's news. Third, the old science. When the modern doctors fail, they send for one strange man. Professor Van Helsing, who has read the medicine and the metallurgy and the folklore all at once, and who alone is willing to believe the evidence in front of him, even though his instruments cannot measure it. He is the hinge of the book, and his challenge to his rational young colleagues is really Stoker's challenge to the whole confident modern age. Van Helsing puts it directly. I want you to believe in things that you cannot. And he explains the trap the others keep falling into, the fatal comfort of dismissing what does not fit. It is the fault of our science, he says, that it wants to explain all, and if it explain not, then it says there is nothing to explain. That is the deepest idea in the novel. Dracula's greatest weapon is not his strength or his fangs. It is disbelief, the refusal of clever, educated people to accept that the threat is real, because accepting it would mean admitting the world is stranger and more dangerous than their models allow. Every hour they spend insisting there must be a rational explanation is an hour the predator uses to feed. We know this failure well. It is the expert who explains away the early warning because it does not match the spreadsheet, the institution that treats the whistleblower as the problem, the smart person so invested in being right that they cannot see the fire. Stoker's answer is not to abandon science. Van Helsing uses every modern tool he can get, but to marry it to humility, to hold reason in one hand and in the other, the willingness to believe the evidence of your own eyes even when it terrifies you. Refusing to believe in the threat is exactly how the threat wins. Fourth, Mina's mind. For all its stakes and crucifixes, the true hero of Dracula is a young woman with a typewriter. Mina Harker is a schoolteacher, careful, tender, and formidably intelligent, and it is she who does the work that saves them all. She gathers every scattered journal and letter and telegram, transcribes them, and types them into a single coherent record, so that for the first time the group can see the whole shape of what they are fighting. Knowledge in this book is survival, and Mina is the one who builds it. Then the monster strikes at her directly. Dracula forces his blood on her, binding her to himself, and she feels the corruption beginning, the fear that she will become the very thing they hunt. And here the book does something remarkable. Instead of collapsing into a victim to be rescued, Mina turns her wound into a weapon. Because Dracula's blood ties them together, Van Helsing hypnotizes her at dawn and dusk, and through that dark link she can sense where the Count is. The lap of water, the creak of timber, the dark of the hold, and she guides the hunters toward him. The victim becomes the tracker. The one he tried to make his instrument becomes the instrument of his undoing. There is something piercingly modern in that. Mina is the person who best understands the system, and precisely because she has been marked by it, she can turn it inside out. Stoker, writing at the dawn of the new woman, gives the sharpest mind and the steadiest nerve in the whole novel to Mina, and insists, quietly and against his own era, that the smartest person in the room, the one who actually reads the data and thinks it through, may well be the woman everyone else keeps trying to protect. Fifth, racing the sunset. Cornered in London, Dracula does what he has always done. He retreats, shipping himself back toward his castle in a box of earth, planning to wait a few decades and return when everyone who knows his secret is dead. And that is his real menace. Not that he is strong, but that he has forever. He can afford to lose. He can afford to wait out any single life. He says as much in a boast that names the whole terror of him. My revenge is just begun. I spread it over centuries, and time is on my side. Against an enemy with all of time, the friends have only speed and each other. So the last movement of the book becomes a desperate chase across Europe. By train, by steam launch up an icy river, on horseback through the snow. Mina's hypnotic visions guiding them, the sun sinking toward the horizon, everything hanging on whether they can reach the box before nightfall frees him. They catch the gypsies carrying his coffin at the very last light of day, break it open, and end him in the final seconds before dark. And here is the point Stoker has been building toward the whole time. The immortal, unstoppable, patient predator, the thing with time on its side, is defeated not by a single hero, but by a group who pooled everything they knew and refused to let any one of them face the dark alone. The lesson of Dracula, under all the fog and the fangs, is almost tender. Evil counts on isolation, on your silence, on your certainty that you must handle it by yourself. And the one thing it cannot survive is people who share what they know and stand together in the light. So what does all of it add up to? Stoker wrote a horror novel, but he built it around a set of anxieties that have only grown sharper in the 120-odd years since. He wrote about a border-crossing threat that hides inside ordinary cargo and spreads by contact. A contagion the experts cannot name until it is loose in the capital. He wrote about a confident modern civilization, proud of its machines and its medicine, blindsided by something its instruments could not detect, and nearly destroyed by its own refusal to believe. He wrote about how the oldest evil works, not by force, but by invitation, waiting to be welcomed across a threshold we open ourselves. And against all of that, he set not a superhero, but a fellowship, a lawyer, a doctor, a professor, a lord, a Texan, and a brilliant woman, armed mainly with the discipline to write everything down and share it. The vampire is powerful because he is alone and patient and answerable to no one. The humans win because they are none of those things, because they are mortal and frightened and bound to each other, and they turn that binding into their strength. That is why the story has never let go of us. Strip away the cape and the castle, and Dracula is a book about what it takes to face a patient, faceless, boundary-crossing danger. Not a lone champion, but trust, shared knowledge, and the refusal to be picked off one by one in the dark. Here is the one thing to carry out of this book and into your week. Pay attention to the invitations. The great predator of this novel could not simply break in. By an ancient rule, he had to be welcomed, and he was a master at getting good, courteous, reasonable people to hold the door and stand aside. That is not only a rule for vampires. The things that do us the most harm rarely kick the door down. They ask charmingly to be let in. The manipulator who counts on your politeness. The bad deal you sense is wrong, but sign because backing out would be awkward. The small compromise you wave through because making a scene feels ruder than the compromise itself. Harker walked into the trap because leaving would have been impolite, and the walls closed quietly behind his good manners. So this week, when something asks to be let across your threshold and a quiet voice says, "Do not," give yourself permission to be the person who does not open the door, even at the cost of seeming rude, difficult, or unreasonable. And notice the other half of Stoker's answer, because it is just as practical. The friends survive by refusing to face the dark alone. They write it down, they say it out loud, they pool what each of them knows so that no single person carries the whole weight of it in secret. Whatever you are quietly dreading by yourself right now, the thing you have not said, the fear you keep in the dark. The book's oldest wisdom is that evil feeds on isolation, and the simplest counterspell is to bring it into the light and tell someone you trust. Stoker spends 400 pages making one quiet, durable case that the ancient, patient, boundary-crossing evil is real, that a proud modern world is exactly the kind of place it can slip into unseen, and that the only thing strong enough to stop it is not a lone hero, but a circle of ordinary people who trust each other and share what they know. Dracula had strength, centuries, and all the time in the world. What beat him was a handful of mortals who wrote everything down, believed the evidence of their own eyes, and refused to let a single one of them stand alone in the dark. If this walk through Dracula gave you something worth keeping, subscribe. A new classic every week, faithfully, in about 20 minutes. Next time, we sail for revenge itself with Alexandre Dumas and the Count of Monte Cristo, the story of a man buried alive by betrayal who returns with a fortune and a plan, and spends the rest of his life discovering what vengeance costs the one who serves it. And tell me in the comments, what invitation have you learned the hard way that you should never have accepted?